It just adds to the question marks, especially when it lines up against OTK Demon Hunter, which I am with you. I think this deck's very strong and also very quick, right? It does what it does in a pretty reasonable amount of time, especially compared to this Warlock. So I do worry for Thijs a little bit as we dive into game one.
Sigil, opening hand from Seiko. He will be holding on to that. Thijs holds on to Tour Guide Backfire, which somewhat signifies he is going to be going for the shut your eyes and pray approach to drawing cards with Warlock in this matchup. I certainly think it's a bit extreme to be throwing away big card draw effects like Backfire in this matchup, but I do think there's a certain hand which involves, Tour Guides and Cult Neophytes that is a little bit more effective against Demon Hunter overall. However, that's a hand that I think worked better with the previous version of the deck that also had Pantharas in there, right? So you could play a little bit more of a zoomy approach in the early game, and the weapon as well, of course.
Nothing too fancy for Thijs to kick it off here. Just going to get that quest active. I imagine it's going to be the same response here from Seiko.
Yeah, interesting to me that Seiko went Studies on 1 and then went Quest Sigil on 2. It does make sense. I mean, both lines lead to the point where you're going to Sigil on 2 anyway, and then you're looking to complete a quest step on 3. But by doing it this way, your Outcast card that you discover from the studies on turn 1 is actually one spot closer to the left-hand side of your hand, right? Which is where you are probably going to end up casting it from. So I actually think this is a cute little piece of sequencing from Seiko that's actually improved his hand quite significantly.
And look at this turn. He can shuffle away the Guild Trader, as you mentioned, gets that Spectral Sight to the far left. He can draw 2 more cards if he wants, or he can go a different way here, which is something that looks strange the first few times you see it, but obviously it makes sense, right? Because that Spectral will always draw 2 from the far left at any given point in this game now, and he may as well just get the clean quest activation and hold the Spectral potentially for future turns to actually get the second proc even more smoothly.
And this is the real difficult part, I think, of playing OTK Demon Hunter, is that it's constant hand assessment at all times, because Seiko there, he could have drawn up to 3 out of 4 and then ripped the Spectral Sight on 3 out of 4, right, to then discount potentially an extra card. You have to weigh out the advantages of that versus what you said, which is having that Spectral Sight still locked in the left-hand position. But I think because he already has Guild Trader as well, that's why he's choosing to do it this way, right? Because even a Cult Neophyte play from the opponent does not stop his plan at this point. He draws 2 at the start of turn effect with the Sigil, so he's on 2 out of 5. Then he just has Spectral Sight for 3 and 4. He has Tradable for 5. So he's almost guaranteed to be able to lock out another quest step just based on the cards that he could see on the previous turn.
Now he has to review again, because I don't think he'll be overly bothered by this Neophyte and Tour Guide on the board. If anything, he might actually actively not want to kill the Neophyte to try and dodge a Raised Dead, for example, like a guaranteed Neophyte Raised Dead. So I think, this is just a pretty happy just quest progression turn. Now he has to choose whether he wants to actually go Tusk Piercer, Hero Power, and kill the Neophyte or not here. I guess he wants to swing, it's just where he puts this.
Yeah, Tusk is happening, Hero Power is happening, but the decision here, as Raven is quite rightly referring to, is to whether you are willing to give a Raised Dead and another Neophyte to your opponent. And I think Seiko understands that a Raised Dead on this turn would be a fairly poor Raised Dead for his opponents. I think he's willing to give it over at this point.
Oh, what about Coil Raised Dead? Oh, that just becomes clean.
Becomes clean. Still don't think it becomes clean.
Yeah, didn't say good. Just said he could do it. Null comes down now. Thijs just piling on the pressure because, again, like I said, Warlock has become extremely slow after the nerfs, which means there's, at least in this specific game, Giants too far away by far. Nothing else really for Thijs to do. Obviously, the OTK Demon Hunter doesn't often have any real board focus in the early game, so it's not like Thijs can utilize this removal. He's just got to pile on some pressure as however much he can, and honestly, just hope for the best.
Wow, okay, that's too many cards at this point already now for Seiko. Both of those cards will replace themselves. This is the step that will complete Kurtrus as well. So he needs to be just a little bit careful, and I think he'll just end up doing this with the weapon instead.
He could just like swing into the null and I-beam, right?
Sure.
Just to free up some hand space, keep everything a little bit cleaner. Because like you said, the double jump was double jump. It's just too much.
Still has the hand space here, of course. This draws up to 9. Kurtrus will go in 10. So I think he's just going to spend the rest of his mana on continuing to cycle the way he is going about this.
Okay.
Oh, never mind. Okay.
Yeah, most importantly, he is up to 10. And he has Il'gynoth in hand, so there's no scary moments.
That's not to say there aren't punishes left off.
Oh, of course. There's just not the ultimate punish, right? Which is obviously would have been a very big deal.
Oh, that's one of them. It's not to say either that there weren't plays that could have been made to just avoid this eventuality altogether, which I think there absolutely were. Not a big fan of that previous turn from Seiko.
Yeah. Like I said, he just had the I-beam he could just get rid of, right? And it's like, you just feel safe at that point. The null doesn't, you sort of recover some of the health from the null and it's just gone from board.
And even just potentially just dumping out one of the 1-mana minions, even if he wanted to go with the line he took and wanted to lose a card from his hand, just dumping one of the 1-mana minions is okay there. Like, particularly Arcanist is so redundant now with the amount of spell damage that you have in your deck overall in most spots. It's very much going back to the days where the deck was playing Ethereal Org Merchant as well, right? So your spell damage just felt a little bit more redundant in those spots. Worth noting, of course, that Seiko, even though he has the Magtheridon in there, is still playing 2 Guild Traders. He is still maxing out on that full spell damage. So a lot of ways he could have approached it.
Thijs does have a clean kill here. He can Drain Soul and Coil, I imagine he'd go for here, as opposed to Touch. Obviously, he's on full health, so why not draw a card? I guess the question is, he could actually just see, and that's what I think he's shaking his head at, right? If he could actually heal for a bit more, if he wasn't at full health, he could touch Giant, which would become worthwhile. But now he's got the choice between removal and keep the null, trade the null and play Giant, or play Giant and go face because Seiko's at such low health and Kurtrus is at 7-1, so it won't actually strictly kill the Giant on its own. A few decisions there, honestly.
Yeah, and I'm curious as to whether there was a way to actually get all of the healing effects to heal, so the Giant could have come down in the end just by sequencing things differently. I can't, just reconciling it in my own head, I can't personally see it, but it did look like a very awkward turn in the end as it played out.
And the big deal here is, this is one of those moments I was talking about. Warlock's pretty slow, but if they can land a Giant, they've put some pressure on, and then the fear of Battlegrounds Battlemaster has to be there for Seiko, right? Because he does just die. Have these 2 I-beams though. He uses Arcanist, of course, one would more than cut it.
I bet you can do this.
Yeah, it looks about as good as it's ever going to get to me.
Yep. Does the I-beam part of the turn while the I-beam is in outcast position to make sure this all gets lined up as nicely as possible, and then continues with his turn so he doesn't have to worry about our outcast concerns any longer. It looks like he's trying to deliberately unlock the other I-beam from the left-hand side of his hand as well, which is pretty cute as well.
Yep, just wants to get to that other I-beam, clear up the board, and potentially, again, this is where the play goes backwards, right? Thijs had the threatening minions that Seiko could not ignore, and now, whenever there's a Moag sat on the board, you do have to be terrified. It just certainly has to die. And Thijs has easy ways to kill this. It's not like Thijs has to struggle, but he does have to kill it. And now, looking at this hand, sort of like, if he kills it, well, even now, just after the tap, all he could do is clear this board. That's pretty rough.
It is, yeah. Slowish game to get down towards to those 10 cards. I guess actually what he could do to at least get a 6/6 on board is just use Soul Rend here instead of anything else and just delete 2 cards from his deck.
I think that might be a good idea. It's a lot better than just passing.
Yeah. Got to try and retain some tempo here. Lack of Neophyte could be a problem, though. We do see Il'gynoth in hand sometimes when you have a 5-mana or a 6-mana Il'gynoth as opposed to a 4-mana Il'gynoth hitting the Kurtrus discount. The amount of mana you have to pay for the Fellscream Blast does matter during the turn to actually get the kill. So that Cult Neophyte could have been a tool to potentially buy Thijs one more turn.
Yeah, here the Seiko does still have 0-mana Spectral there, the Acrobatics to draw 2 as well. Does have Glide, but I'm not sure if that's as worthwhile now, because he's already seen like 2 out of the 4 10 or less cards already been played.
Rips the Immolation or a Spectral Sight, lights up yellow as well, which is quite exciting, I'm sure, for Seiko to have seen, which means it's coming in right now. Yep, perfect positioning. Very nice. That's the last Fellscream, so he can't really be using that for his Magtheridon clear, I would imagine.
Yeah, he wants second Immo, right? He's still got another one?
Yeah.
Vigil.
They will never catch me.
Oh! He's fine, right? He's nowhere near dead.
Yep, still at 30, he has plenty of time. Just needs to get down towards the bottom of that deck and he'll be absolutely fine. Essentially there, the Magtheridon was just a card that Seiko could play so that he didn't have to worry about drawing it back again after the glide, right? It's like a secret passage type of effect, reverse secret passage, just throw the card away before you glide so you don't draw it back again later. If he got the clear with the Immolation Auras and got a 12-12 out of it, cool. Does it matter? Not particularly.
A lot of healing available for Thijs now. He does have that Neophyte as well. So he could just drop a Pagan Neophyte, push everything face, and try and set something up, or try and rely on drawing the Battleground Battlemaster that was shuffled back in the deck at some point soon. The problem is, Thijs will know that there's an Immolation or a left, and with only 3 cards, well, what will be 2 cards left in the deck, and the ability of these tradables to just dig to whatever's left, he has to expect this Magtheridon's going to pop next turn if Seiko requires it to.
Potions, flasks, BOE, I got it all. Potions,
Trade is coming down.
I got it all.
Yeah.
You look like you love a good deal.
Il'gynoth coming down. And then, what, 5 cards left remaining? So he's going to glide at this point.
Then he'll still have 1 mana for a trade. Oh, two mana for trades, right?
Yeah, he'll still have infinite mana at this point. Yep, smart recognition.
Yeah, really well done from Seiko there, just made it guaranteed that he could get to what he wanted. And Thijs takes game number 1 as a loss. Seiko going to go off to a 1-0 lead, and again, the matchup just looked too slow. I think it wasn't really a straightforward matchup before the nerfs, but I do think it's gotten a lot worse for the Warlock, clearly. But it does mean that, yeah, Seiko's 1-0 ahead. And it was a big win there. Nice play from Seiko. I think turn by turn, apart from the potential I-Beam, that kind of weird overdraw turn, I think his overall plan and execution of OTK Demon Hunter was very, very good.
Yeah, and certainly, like, you can see somewhat of the merit of what he did if holding on to it. If it was deliberate and he didn't just rope out, like, I'm not really 100% sure either way. If it was deliberate, he did get use out of the 2 minions that I was talking about potentially dumping and the 2 I-Beams that you were talking about potentially dumping, right? On the turn where he used all of those tools to clear the Giant and the 3-3. I actually even found that turn quite interesting because he chose to use a Spectral Sight that was always going to be outcast from the left as opposed to a Spectral Sight that he just drew from the right, which then stranded that Spectral in the middle a little bit, just to outcast another I-Beam that killed a 3-3 that I didn't personally care that much about at the time. So again, I think you could argue that that I-Beam was expendable, right? Because it ended up just killing a 3-3, which doesn't matter a great deal in the long run. But I do think overall, top-down gameplay, very cleanly played game of Demon Hunter there from Seiko. But just going back to that old mantra of not all conquest wins are created equal, I don't mind that Demon Hunter getting out of the series too much if I am Thijs in that position. I think it's a very good shot that the Demon Hunter was going to pick up a win regardless.
Well, it does mean Thijs is going to land himself in a much more favourable matchup, at least more favourable than I think the previous one was. He does have his own Demon Hunter, as you saw there, the sort of super defensive Fell Demon Hunter. Big points there is he has Glide, and he has a ton of healing in the list, and he is going to be going up against Seiko on Garrote Rogue, and I know you've played a good chunk of, well, both of these decks, but I'm mainly talking about the Demon Hunter, of course, and this version of Demon Hunter, does it have enough to deal with Rogue? Because it has the removal, it has the heal, and it has the glide, but can it actually finish the game in time, even with those tools?
I think yes. Like, this is the big deal about why this practice group, the Thijs, Bunnyhopper, KC, RDU practice group, have largely moved towards this weird version of Fell Demon Hunter with the quest and glide thrown in there as well, because it's a little bit inelegant when you play it. It does seem like the quest is a little bit more clunky in this version of the deck than it is in some others that you play. Like, you know, Chaos Strike just isn't really as efficient a draw card as some of the things that various other decks are playing. You do have a lot of cards in there that interrupt those draw cycles, but only about the same amount as like a Brute Demon Hunter or an OTK Demon Hunter, for example. But the goal is just to get glide into your deck, and what that does is it gives you increased odds against specifically Warlock, Rogue, and Druid, and in particular, the Rogue and Druid are the most important because those are the matchups where Fell Demon Hunter really, really suffers if you're just playing the old school version with no quest, no glide. So the addition of that glide just buys you 2 turns, 3 turns, like entire Hearthstone turns in current meta, by slowing your opponent down so much. So I think it is a massive addition to the deck to have for this matchup.
Well, let's see how it goes. Thijs already got his quest active, of course, has that sigil in hand, along with options, but again, you can't reliably bank a studies because obviously you'll draw additional cards, lock out potential outcast. I do wonder if it's sigil just hero power here.
Also, note the difference, right, between Seiko and Thijs' play with basically the same hand. Seiko with this hand went quest on 1. Went Illidari Studies on
Studies
1,
on 1,
and then quest plus sigil on 2. Whereas Thijs went with the quest on 1, and you see that dynamic I was talking about, right? Now, if Thijs were to play Illidari Studies this turn, the card that he's picking, the Outcast card, would be locked in really the worst possible position in his hand, which is why Seiko went about the turns the way he did. Like, I think, honestly, Seiko just kind of got one up on his opponent if you compare those two little openings.
I agree. That's why I sort of half stopped halfway through my sort of breakdown of that turn, was like, hang on a minute, this isn't as clean. What's going wrong? And now the Neophyte means that the plan for that quest proc 1 turn after the sigil just isn't realistically ever going to pay off, right? Like Illidari Studies, of course, as we mentioned, now 2 mana to even play, never mind whatever he would need to get to keep that draw cooking.
Yeah. Certainly, just to go back to the original point as well, like, Thijs might have matchup considerations here as well, because we did just talk about how important glide specifically is. So a lot of the time in this matchup in particular, when you're playing Illidari Studies, you do want to pick glide, which you can say, okay, well, I'll wait until I can do all of that immediately on 4 mana or above, right?
Right.
I think still very reasonable is to play like the Seiko curve in that position and just have a glide that's moving more comfortably over to the left-hand side of your hand after you've played double jump and whatever else in that position. I think that was an equally valid way to go about it. Well.
Yeah. Well, indeed. I was looking
like it.
Yeah, I was looking at it, slightly worried that for 3 mana they have to spend 1 mana, so it's a bit of a weird trade-off in general. But again, when you are considering that Jace is their only real way to put any kind of fear into you, making them lose potentially 1 Jace spell to test a counter spell is probably worthwhile.
Yeah, but I think in this matchup, more so than just about any other, you have to be super focused on your PGH, your post-glide hand as Rogue, right? So if you take Ignite in that position, you're never playing that card, because whether you play it or not, you're shuffling an Ignite into your deck, which is a card that you can draw after your opponent glides you. Like, your goal with this deck is just to stack your deck as best you can with cards that you want to draw after a glide, because you'll essentially be resetting the game from scratch, right? You'll be drawing an opening hand, very similar to what you do at the very start of the game, and you want to build upon that as quickly as you can. So taking cards like Ignite that are just going to shuffle into your deck and be annoying over the course of the game, just not what you're really interested in.
I guess here's the question for Thijs. Studies into glide, mission achieved, but this hand isn't even a bad hand. If Seiko was ever going to get glowed this turn, he's probably okay with it, right? Like, this hand, of course he got the golem, which is a bit of a shame, but in general, I didn't think he was in such a great position to even be overly worried about glide.
Yep, agreed. This is the slightly frustrating part of this matchup as the Demon Hunter a lot of times. I know originally when both these decks were first kind of appearing, Quest Demon Hunter with Glide and Garrote Rogue, I tested the matchup against TJ a significant number of times. And a lot of times he'd have a 6, 7, 8 card hand, and I'd be like, sick, this Glide's just going to get him. And it just glides him into Octobot field contact exactly back on the other side. I'm like, oh, I've improved your hand. It just seemed to happen consistently. But on average, that's certainly not the case.
And the benefit for Thijs, of course, is that wasn't a glide from his deck, so he still has 2 more in the list, right?
Absolutely. Ooh, picks up the old Jace Ventura. Does also pick up another glide, though. A little bit too expensive to actually cash out the acrobatics value. And now with Jace as a blocker, that's actually an extremely difficult glide to outcast, which is going to be somewhat annoying here.
Does get quest 2 proc, though. At least there's progression there. I did wonder whether he was ever just considering a sort of self-glide, if that makes sense, on that turn, just because he could have just cycled through proc the quest anyway and got some different set of cards, which I think generally right now he doesn't need or want Jace because it's not loaded up in any real way whatsoever.
Yeah, I wondered about that too, but I think if you break the hand down, he had already discounted card draw in his hand, right, which he could use to complete the quest as he did with the acrobatics. And now he can rip glide for the final quest completion, right, to get Kurtrus in.
Oh yeah,
hand.
makes
Whereas
sense, yeah, of
if
course.
he does it the other way around, you glide, you go down to 4 cards, maybe that hand doesn't give you any card draw at that point, and you don't have the card draw you need to complete the final quest up. Interesting. I think you're pretty well aware that your opponent's hand sucks, right? Based on the previous turn of just dagger pass. I think you deliberately non-outcast this glide.
Because that's like the beauty of the card in the Demon Hunter list, right? Is the non-outcast glide still benefits you. Right, it benefits your own personal game plan of activating quests, right? So it's not like if it's not outcast, it's bad.
I think he's looking to dump cards before the glide as much as possible as well, as we were talking about before. No matter how he does this, it's not like he's going to be able to go glide into Kurtrus regardless. So.
I got it all.
Oh, really? He's just going 12-12 instead. Was
Seiko
not
has
expecting this.
Ultimate counter.
He really does.
What was Sottle talking about saying his hand's bad? Look at that hand. It's got a 7-mana deep freeze in it. What more do you need in life?
Oh, Thijs, you have to hold on in there. You cannot get relegated for the simple fact that for all the times you sip tea during your opponent's turn, you are still yet to give us a single spit take during Grandmasters, okay? That was the perfect time for it, and you missed it again. But yeah, rewinding to that previous turn from Thijs, I honestly thought he was considering just like dumping the Magtheridon just again, so it was a card that he didn't have to care about too much after the glide. Obviously, if you play Magtheridon like that, your opponent can just Shadow Step one of the 1/3s and you're just never getting Magtheridon. But at the same time,
okay.
Don't really care. Yeah, yeah.
I do think it's also important just to remind ourselves of is that this isn't an Il'gynoth deck, right? So the Fell Screen Blasts are usable in a more general sense without much punishment, right? He's not got less of an OTK combo now.
That is very fair indeed, yeah. And actually, looking at the way this played out, it's really not that bad, right? He got one turn of potentially really strong tempo with the 12-12. Obviously, that got shut down by Deep Freeze, but there's no way Thijs can realistically be expecting that. And then after that one turn of big tempo with the 12-12, he then got to do card draw glide into Kurtra's same turn, right? So it didn't really slow down his Kurtra's turn at all. So actually, having reevaluated it, I think Thijs probably broke this down pretty well.
So step on the Plunderer will kill off the Magtheridon if he wants it to. It looks like he's going to be okay with a freeze.
I don't know what the Alutemu emote name is that we're supposed to shout at this point. I apologize. I haven't been paying enough attention. But it's... Oh my goodness, this glide is disgusting.
So is this board state, though? That's the problem, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Quality positioning.
Wait a minute.
Seiko,
Could this glide? Does he draw 2 more cards? Six card glide?
Yes, good attention to detail from Seiko on the positioning there, spreading out the water elementals to the 2 sides.
I see.
Gets the Jace back with a significant discount.
Another happy guildie.
I mean, a little bit of extra juice for Jace as well, right? With that Chaos Strike too. Does?
Imagine he will attempt to be unfrozen before playing that Chaos Strike. He might choose to just drop it here as a card draw if he runs out card draw, which he has at this point.
Well,
he still has mana to spend. No, saying no. Okay.
That's the problem though, right? Like,
It's quiet.
he's going to wait to be unfrozen, but is he going to be unfrozen ever?
Right.
That's why I thought he maybe should have drawn to try and get something to kill off these elementals.
Right.
Because I asked you the question, have they got... Is there a good enough plan to finish out the game in a reasonable fashion as Demon Hunter? Thijs had a 12-12 and a 7-7 on board. That's a great start, but Jace does almost nothing in regards to damage if you are frozen, because you can't swing all those weapon buff effects, of course. It's very, very scary at the moment.
And the field contact coming back here for Seiko is devastating, because not only does this mean he's continuing to progress his own game plan towards the Garrote combo at the end of the game, but it also means he's getting enough tools to actually deal with this board state. And if he can deal with the board state, he can attack face. And if he can attack face with a water elemental, Thijs' whole deck does basically nothing at this point.
And if Thijs' whole deck does basically nothing at this point, he loses. Just to add that on.
And if he loses this game and one more, the tone of the delivery has changed, Draven. He is going to be relegated. So this is serious, serious problems appearing now for Thijs. Immolation Aura.
Oh,
he
it's
just
all the
needs
things
it.
you don't want.
He just needs it.
Okay, Chaos Strike just... You can just throw that card away, right? You don't get to swing. It's only 2 damage. It gets put in the Jace pool. Most importantly, it draws you a card. Because I also don't think he's... Has he played enough cards to even guarantee kills here on that Water Elemental? Hell Barrage to kill them.
Guarantee? No, I don't think.
Hell Scream to 3. Into 2. Oh.
Okay. Oh, the Chaos Strike finds the Immolation Aura.
But this is the problem now, right? Does he even have enough damage in the deck to make this relevant in the amount of time? 2 cards left. He does have Aldraki Warblades, which is a big deal, but he's got like 2 relevant weapon swings, and then that's going to be pretty much it. Giving you a quick look here, Thijs' last 2 cards. Ignore the Furies, please. Those Studies and Fell Barrage.
Efficient is sufficient.
Hey, loser!
even then, does he get a chance to do it? Because
Well,
Seiko on the other side only has 4 cards remaining in his deck on his own.
And I think importantly for Seiko here, he has to fully understand where he's at in this game. And he will, of course, that Jace has been played. It was mediocre at best. And he'll know what Thijs has left. He has the Warblades, he has some weapon buffs. But as long as Seiko doesn't just die to that, he just naturally wins, even if he has to play normal Garrotes with no spell damage at worst, right? And that's why I really like this turn. He could have maybe gone for something fancy, but instead, guess what? He puts 2 big taunts on the board, he clears up the minion, he keeps himself safe going forward.
Yeah, I do have that question, which is, was that not just lethal with a 1-mana field contact in hand? But I will accept the answer. It doesn't matter. Yeah. This was lethal also.
Chaos Leech will be able to clean up one of the golems, but again, there's another one, and I was already talking about whether Thijs has enough total value / damage in the deck to even win the game if Seiko passed, but
yeah,
if he has to dump a swing or a fury or something into one of these other golems, then I don't think hero power is going to cut it.
I agree. Do you think that Jace timing was a little bit odd from Thijs? It has to be said. You've been advocating for the use of the Chaos Strike for a couple of turns, and that's something that I did agree with. It was one more shot to just draw that remaining Immolation Aura from the deck that he did end up drawing anyway, right? And then if he got access to that, he could pair it with the 0-mana Arcanist or a 0-mana Guild Trader to be able to clear the board, not be frozen anymore, potentially get those swings to go face multiple times then with the Jace, backing it all up again at the end. But I think with the Jace coming down, that kind of signed his death note at that point of him just not really having the tools left remaining in the deck to end this. Even though Seiko's going to end it on his terms here with the Garrote combo, I just don't think Thijs had the tools to get over the line at this point anymore.
Yeah, and of course this is one single game of Hearthstone on stream so far of this Demon Hunter, but this is kind of the problem I personally ran into when I was testing it out, was I really felt the lack of Il'gynoth in a lot of matchups. Obviously against just straightforward aggro, you can just heal and removal your way through the game, but the lack of just an extra way to punch even just a reasonable chunk of damage was really missed, at least by me.
Indeed, deck certainly has some issues. I think it certainly has some big strengths as well, but not getting the job done for Thijs on that occasion. As we see the bleeds flying, we see Seiko go 2 wins up, and now Thijs has his entire remaining lineup to take on, I believe, the Mage from Seiko.
Yes, so he has his Warlock, his Demon Hunter, and his Druid. And for Thijs, the Druid is the Celestial with the Glowflies, with Claw Machine and so on in there that we've seen a lot in Europe. So it's a big ask, isn't it? I think it's definitely doable. We've seen Thijs recover from tough situations before. I think if anyone can do it, Thijs can. But I think just looking at matchups overall, it feels quite difficult, because even if we just say Thijs can get a win with the Demon Hunter, which again I think is actually a tough matchup without the Il'gynoth, I think the Warlock's really bad as well now, and the Druid maybe less so, but I think the Warlock and Demon Hunter combo make this, unfortunately for Thijs, quite unlikely.
I agree, yeah. I think there are various levels of difficulty coming into this, where the Druid, fine. I think Thijs is largely chilling. He has some board presence, he has some threats, he has some armor gain, he has Celestial Alignment, which are all things that mess with the Mage. Demon Hunter, middle ground. Fel Demon Hunter, can struggle to get there quickly enough in some situations, but I don't necessarily think that matchup is that bad. This is Fel Demon Hunter plus Glide, which can do some work to disrupt Quest Mage as well. So I think that matchup is certainly winnable. Maybe just the wrong side of even, but very, very winnable. Warlock, that's final boss mode at that point. That is such a hard matchup now to win from the Warlock side. It was tricky before, but your ability to get Flesh Giants down at 8 mana was what carried you through the game a lot of the time alongside Cold Neophytes. Then the ability to get them down at 9 mana, then the ability to get them down at 10 mana. And now even that has been slowed down, because the indirect nerf that comes from nerfing the speed of the quest procs is the speed of those double effects, the lifesteal effects discounting your giant even further, right? So now giants, the only real huge minions in the deck, come down so much slower in that matchup that mage just tends to have so much time to get the job done themselves.
Yeah, I think at the moment versus mage, it's one of those matchups where you hope their flows and all of their freeze effects are like bottom 6 cards in the deck or something, because if they can even have a reasonable path of progression through the game, I feel it generally does go way too fast. We are going to get the Demon Hunter up first. Again, another tough matchup. Demon Hunter can't not swing face to win the game, or at least this form of it can't. So ice barriers, as you can see there very nicely in Seiko's opening hand, are very impactful. And if Seiko can get 2 relatively early ice barriers at relevant times, that'll be a big factor in whether Thijs can even make or deal enough damage to win the game. Again, never mind not getting blown up, but actually to win the game, 2 barriers add a lot.
Is it just me, Raven, or was Thijs dunking his teabag with just a little less passion than he usually does there? It's becoming very real, isn't it? 2-0 down, bad matchups left to win here for Thijs. And again, a loss in this series will mean he is outright relegated from Hearthstone Grandmasters. Again, he's coming out here with the Fell Demon Hunter. Not a matchup I have a ton of experience with because of how rare this particular build of Demon Hunter is, but I would hesitate, I guess, to say is somewhere close to even, if not ever so slightly, the wrong side of it for the Demon Hunter. But it's a winnable match.
Yeah, definitely winnable, but Seiko has a reasonable opening. Like I said, getting the ice barriers active is very important. You don't want ice barriers at the bottom of the deck here just because they soak up so much of that damage that this Demon Hunter is forced to make. They have to swing face to win the game.
Mm-hmm.
And once again, even though, well, I guess Thijs could do it with coin, Seiko would be more than happy at a glide this turn, I think, with his hand right now.
He would. In which case, does this mean Thijs is just going to coin Magtheridon here? And then get his 12-12 on the following turn? No, he is going to coin the glide. He's going quest completion here instead. Okay. We'll get a full discounted hand here, of course. Picking up the Jace sucks. That is now in huge blocker position for Thijs.
Yeah, it's a tough one, right? Because although, one, we could see the hand, but the hand was small, which is normally a factor of Mage. Doesn't have a great hand if the hand size is quite small. But most importantly, I think Thijs might have just thought, I need to get this done. I need Kurtrus down. Then I need to draw tons of stuff at in one go. Do one big punch, and then Jace for the second big punch, and that's it. That's how I win the game. And I can see it.
Yeah, I think, again, the fear is just lack of overall damage, right? Because in previous builds of the deck, you would have like a Metamorphosis, for example, which can be 12, 16 extra damage over the course of the game if you get to play it, use it, reload it with Jace after the fact. Dealing 46 just with the weapon swings and Fell Barrages that you have in the deck might just be a little bit tricky if Seiko is able to get this second Ice Barrier activated as well.
It's going to dump Immo, kind of a pointless card in the matchup, of course, and then go glide again, get rid of that Jace in the awkward spot.
Yep. I think glide was a very welcome pickup there for Thijs because of exactly what his hand looked like. He knows he is throwing an extra minion into the deck here for Seiko, which is kind of interesting as well. Small prospect of disrupting refreshing spring waters and that kind of thing.
Speaking of which.
Indeed. And not only does throwing a minion into the deck disrupt refreshing spring water, but I think there's a much bigger factor is that Seiko probably wanted to play whatever minion he'd got off the studies to shoot it himself on the following turn, right? Like that was probably Seiko's big plan.
Does have Mag, so he does have the option for Mag Flurry, for example, this turn if he wants to start that going.
I wonder.
Just need Fire Frost. With Mag Flurry and then start with Fire Sale next turn. It does mean he doesn't get to play the Incanters quite yet, but it does accelerate the game plan. And again, it's because he has the Ice Barrier as well, Although you normally say, oh, just don't proc the barrier if you end up with 1-1-3. But Thijs has to proc the barrier at some point, and he can't OTK through it, right? So this second barrier in Seiko's hand will be played at some point soon.
As long as it doesn't end up back in the deck from glide number 3 at some point.
Glide number 300, yeah.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean, right? Like, should Thijs not attack here? Because one of the benefits of not attacking is you don't proc the barrier, so another barrier can't be played, which could slow Frost down for the third and final stage of the quest.
Yeah, I do think that's a worthwhile consideration for sure. Particularly in this instance because... well, actually, no. In this instance, you have minions in play still, right? So even though you're doing Frost for your opponent if they have Ice Barrier, because you have minions that aren't going anywhere, your opponent could just use Second Flurry, Brain Freeze, whatever they want on this turn before they clear the board with Fire Sale or whatever their plan was, right? So I don't actually think second Frost or third Frost Spell is a big concern in Thijs' mind right now, and I think 1 damage is just 1 damage in that position.
Push the 1. But yeah, the just finishing it off, the small benefits are if there is, as we can see, only Ice Barrier available in the hand, then that's the small benefit, but that benefit's probably too small to really play around. Get the damage done. Even now. That Magtheridon's actually quite hard for Thijs to kill.
It's extremely hard.
Deep freeze
go! Yeah. Oh no! Oh, not like this!
You don't even...
Here again!
You don't even read the other cards.
No, it's not guidance. You do look.
Not if the middle one's blue.
Incanters flow?
I mean, yeah, sure. Bastion, I am shocked.
Wow.
So Seiko going for a card he needed for the spell school as opposed to going for the overall better card in general for the game.
Yep, which means he is sticking to plan A as opposed to plan B. It's a fantastic plan B. We basically saw that card single-handedly solo the game in the previous game where he picked it up as a rogue, so I certainly would have given it strong consideration in this one as well, but Seiko just saying he can get on with his quest at this point. How do you even get there? Are you going to come down first? Is he playing the Cow Strike this turn? He's going to play Fury this turn, okay.
I'm literally staring at this, and the problem as well is the way this might pan out. I mean, let's see how Thijs approaches it here, but in a lot of worlds, like even if you just look at Fel Barrage, like we're talking about can Thijs deal, what was it, 40 whatever damage through the 2 barriers and the natural health of the mage. Well, can he do that if his Fel Barrages are hitting a Magtheridon and not face? It's another big question, right? It's just like adding more health to the mage, and for Seiko, it's a big deal right now.
Can he do it if he only has 2 more turns to live because there's a 12-12 hitting him in the face? Also, no.
So I guess here he goes Fireball Flow, right? So he can dodge proc because he won't want to proc the quest this turn.
To play around it getting glided back into his hand again. Yeah, there's probably far too many cards in his deck at the moment to be taking that risk. I think sometimes you can just shut your eyes and ignore it, especially when you've seen glides from the opponent, but I do think you'll want to avoid it.
Yeah, I think the fact he's just under so little threat, right? Like, it's not like, oh, I need it now, I need it active as soon as possible. He can barrier and still Dawngraf's next turn, and then he has Cram Session, right? Which is the turn after job done. He could actually Cram Session next turn, right? If he just freezes the 7/7.
I do think the other dynamic that probably needed to be considered there as well is if Thijs were to glide that turn, to glide away the Varden quest reward, he's also gliding away his own Kurtrus quest reward at that point as well, which could weigh into the considerations as well as to whether you think Thijs would be doing it at that point. Like, it's a very complex risk-reward tree, I think, in that position. But I think, again, it is leveraged by the fact that Seiko just thinks he has enough time here because he has the one piece of critical information that Thijs doesn't have in that scenario, which is that second ice barrier that he has locked up on the left-hand side of the hand.
And depending on how this turn ends up, and that's what I talk about. Yeah, that's what's over 8 damage that could have gone face has to go into the Magtheridon. And the big deal here for Seiko as well is if this minion sticks around, which it will, there's no way for Thijs to kill it, he can actually just go snap freeze, right, and still get the cram session in.
That's very true.
And because he played flow last turn, it could open up some options, although he might just say, well, if I just play barrier, is this just overall, again, it's a weird word to use, but safer? Does this just dodge any crazy shenanigans happening?
Yeah, it is, I suppose, something you have to consider is, like, there's a big Jace push here, right? Furies have been played, Chaos Strike's been played, Fel Barrage has been played. Say you get down low enough at that point that, like, I don't know, Guild Trader, Fel Barrage or something stupid like that just kills you without interacting with an ice barrier at all. We've talked about that dynamic with, like, Hunter versus Mage, right? Where you need those ice barriers basically on curve or Hunter will just ignore them for the entire game. But I suppose that is a fairly similar dynamic. But most importantly, Thijs' reaction as he saw the second ice barrier come down was borderline heartbreaking there, because that might have just been the moment he knew that this was still going to be a significant uphill climb from this position.
Yep. The order not fantastic for him either, getting that Fel Barrage to actually go into the Dawn Grass before he could clear it up. Thijs again is going to prot the ice barrier very cleanly here, kill off the 8 with 8, but still he just has to do this. He gains a lot of health, but you just know it's only going to get worse from here.
Oh, what is even the plan?
Session, yeah. Oh.
What is even the plan at this point for Thijs? Once again, cut the Furies out of that list and find me a win condition.
How much spell damage can we get for Fel Barrage? Are we going to get the ultimate Fel Barrage to face? Even the freeze, so Seiko doesn't have to particularly spend mana on killing this if he doesn't want to. He can also choose to kill it and not spend mana with First Flame. No big crazy burst damage yet, though. Does have double Fireball, of course, in hand, but not castable this turn. And this, generally speaking, has been my experience, but I've been the Demon Hunter of this matchup. When I face into Mage, it's just, I just can't get quite enough done, mainly if there's 2 Ice Barriers, as we've seen now. But Seiko just still on 28 at this point in the game.
It's just such a huge problem. Like, what are we even looking at? 4 damage from the Warblades in total, 2 from the Chaos Strike, that's 6. 4 of that's just literally going to a minion right now as I talk about it. So that's 6 damage in total. The Furies aren't real, they're not there. Outside of that, you have 1 Fel Barrage remaining alongside 2 Guild Traders. So even then, that's a maximum of, what, 16 extra damage can go? Like, there's no way damage can go into a minion at this point, and Thijs can hope to survive. He needs a 7/7 to connect, he needs a Magtheridon to connect, he needs Fel Barrage with maximum spell damage alongside both Guild Traders and the Talented Arcanist to all hit face without hitting a single minion on the other side. I'm just not seeing it.
Me neither, unfortunately. I just don't see a way.
Is he just dead even?
Potentially. There's still double Fireball. Yeah, he is very dead, and unfortunately that is going to spell the end for Thijs in Grandmasters. Seiko takes the victory 3-0. Wait, what? Wait.
Yeah, I mean, I guess do it with Ignite. I mean, he just had 2 11 damage fireballs in his hand, but okay. I guess you can do it that way. Yeah. Not the cleanest way for it to go down, but Thijs throwing up the heart, and that is a devastating outcome, I'm sure. For us, for Thijs, for legions of Thijs fans around the world. Of course, one of the most popular Hearthstone players to ever do it, and one of the absolute best to ever do it. Like the legacy of Thijs will live on forever. The multiple European championships, the legendary series with Osaka in the World Championship semi-final, which people still talk about to this day. Probably the only World Championship match that people talk about more than Hunter Ace's final still to this day. Maybe Pavel and Amnesiac thrown in there as well, but that is probably your Mount Rushmore of World Championship series. Thijs has done it all, and as we keep mentioning, the winningest player in Hearthstone history in terms of overall prize money has unfortunately now been relegated from Grandmasters.
Yeah, really, really tough season for Thijs. Of course, it's very sad to see him go. But I do want to say Seiko has continued to impress this season, right? A lot of the time, and maybe this is just my, foggy memory or not, but I feel like Seiko's definitely sort of hung around at the middle of the pack for a lot of Grandmasters seasons. He's had great moments, but not really cashed in on them. But for this season, I think he's looking very strong as he puts another win under his belt there and moves on to the semi-finals of the final week of the European Hearthstone Grandmasters.
Yes, in